vehicles that Ford plans to launch by the year 2022.
Uber and food delivery startup Postmates are suing the state of California over a contentious gig economy bill set to go into effect tomorrow. David Bosa joins us now with more. We talked about this. It's a lot of angles to consider. It's just not knee-jerk what the right thing is.
No, it's a difficult one, right? And it's the 11th hour. We're a day away from this going into effect. It could affect 1 million workers in California. And of course, the gig economy companies are the ones with a lot at stake. So this lawsuit, it comes after months of unsuccessful lobbying for a carve-out to the law known as AB5, Assembly Bill 5. With the lawsuit, Uber and Postmates, they're essentially, guys, putting on their gloves and escalating the fight. They're doing it along with 2 individual gig economy workers, drivers. These companies are suing California and its attorney general, claiming that AB5 violates constitutional guarantees of equal protection and due process because of how it targets some workers and companies. Now, the law will require some industries in California's gig economy to reclassify contractors as employees. Now, there are some exemptions for contract lawyers, doctors, engineers, other professions, but not so for truck drivers, freelance journalists, nor drivers in ride-sharing and food delivery. So all 3 of these groups now separately are using legal means to fight back. Uber and Postmates, the latest, filing their complaint last night. Now, AB5, as you guys have been talking about today, is meant to give drivers, gig economy workers, more protections. But many drivers and others in the gig economy argue that it will actually take away their flexibility, and certainly it could upend the business models of these companies. Either way, though, Uber and others could spend millions fighting it, facing resulting lawsuits themselves, or ultimately changing the status of their workers. And it pushes that path to profitability that we've been talking about all year, guys, further out when investors are already skeptical. Uber left poised to close out 2019 as some of the worst performing IPOs of the year, and it's really at this point uncertain how this plays out. They've been really lobbying for this exemption for months.
So we want an exemption, we want an exemption, we want an exemption. We didn't get an exemption. This law is not fair because of the exemptions?
No, so they say they wanted an exemption, but even as it goes ahead as is, they say they don't pass the so-called ABC test that requires companies to treat their contractors as employees, so they're not going to do anything.
But I think the legal reasoning they're going after this is because it violates their constitutional rights because of the carve-outs, because not everybody is being targeted equally.
Yeah.
Like, we want to be one of the exemptions, and if we don't get it, the whole law is unfair?
That's a good point. They say that it's with no rhyme or reason allowing some professions to be exempt and not others, but the key thing that they're doing is they're filing this complaint along with 2 gig economy workers, right? Drivers for Postmates and for Uber, who are saying that if this goes into effect, they essentially cannot work anymore. They need the flexibility, and the fact that they haven't been listened to adequately, in their opinion, throughout the process denies them their
the unintended consequence of, we know about good intentions and where they lead, and I mean, if the unintended consequence is to kill the gig economy, then all the people that they don't have the perfect situation with their job right now, but do you destroy all the jobs in general because you don't have the perfect situation? I mean, these companies are operating on a razor margin right now. This is not going to allow their business model to continue.
It won't if it goes into effect.
That's what I mean. So do they think about that in California? That do you want to kill the goose that lays the golden gig egg?
Well, remember, too, that California is just the start. Other states are considering similar legislation.
We all we'd all like full health care. We'd all like, to have an unbelievable 401. We'd all like all these beautiful, great things.
The same arguments that have been brought against Walmart and others for years and years. If you are offering affordable products to consumers and consumers love you, are you doing that on the backs of your workers?
But a company that doesn't...
Walmart has changed their policy for
a company that doesn't exist doesn't employ anyone.
That's true.
And, Uber and Lyft have said, though, that they will actually give benefits to their workers. They'll give a minimum wage. Again, it goes back to the whole crux of the argument. How do you regulate tech companies? How do you regulate in this environment where gig economy is taking up so much of the workforce now? Do you trust the companies to do it themselves?
I don't trust Democrats in California. That I can tell you.
Well, let's bring a couple other voices in to talk about this story more. Sarah Fisher is media reporter at Axios. Emily Glazer joins us from the Wall Street Journal. What does this mean? And I I guess I'll start with you, Emily, since you're there in the heart of things. What does this mean right now? What are kind of the quakes that you're feeling there throughout California as this law is set to go into effect?
Everyone is talking about this in California. I'm based in Los Angeles, travel to San Francisco frequently. It's hard to get into a Lyft or Uber without a driver sometimes mentioning it. And let's not forget there are a lot of folks that file as contract workers based on their taxes. I think it accounts for about 14% of people in California. So even though the Uber CEO recently said that California accounts for about 9% of its Uber rides and Eats bookings, and that it is a much more negligible amount when it comes to adjusted EBITDA. This is going to have a really big impact, both for the state of California, and it's why Uber, Lyft, and others are spending more than $100 million to try to get out of it.
Sarah, what does this mean from a policy perspective? Because I can understand both sides of the argument. If you have employees who really are employees because they're working 40 hours or longer for a company, feeling like they are not being paid a fair, basic minimum wage. But then you have other people who would like to have the flexibility of being able to drop in for 10 hours or 12 hours or 20 hours and pick their time. How should legislators be looking at this, and how should national and other states kind of follow what's happening?
I think this is an enforcement argument. One of the arguments that's being made is that we have no way to measure how many people are being misaligned as being, full-time workers, when in reality they're actually contracted workers.
Well, that seems kind of crazy when you call yourself a tech company, not a ride sharing, not an actual car company or anything else, right? If your entire company is set up to do that, that seems a little disingenuous.
It does seem disingenuous, and that's why California lawmakers are going after these ride-sharing companies, the app companies in particular, and they're leaving carve-outs for some of the legacy industries like real estate, like medicine, because they don't think that they're being disingenuous in the way that they file some of these claims.
I can understand. Look, I can understand both sides of that too, though. If I'm Uber and I'm Lyft, and I'm saying you're carving out other industries and not me, why not?
And one of the things that they said in this complaint was that you're biased against us. They say, well, we're biased against you because you've tried time and time again to undermine regulation.
Right, and that's a fair call. You have to look at some of the history of what's gone on to this point. These companies were trying to skate by and not be regulated.
And remember, they've been regulating this issue, negotiating this issue in courts for months and months and months. This isn't something that's brand new. Uber's paid out millions of dollars already. Some of it has been forced into mandatory arbitration. So I understand why this is sticky.
What happens now, though? I mean, if this law is set to go into effect tomorrow, is there a stay as they wait to see what happens with this lawsuit as it goes forward?
Well, they're hoping that the complaint can bring it to a court, which could potentially file an injunction, which would say you can't enforce this law until potentially we can get it onto a ballot measure in November 2020. But to me, that seems unlikely. I think that Uber, Lyft, and these companies are going to have to comply beginning January 1. And if they want to get it onto a ballot measure, they're already spending millions to do it. They're going to have to fight pretty hard.
They're feeling nervous. I also wonder, I thought what was really interesting about the complaint last night is it includes Uber and Postmates. Where's DoorDash? Where's Lyft? Where's some of the other guys? Do they have their own strategies? Some of them have been very quiet throughout this process. Uber has been one of the most vocal. I wonder what they're planning to do because they cannot let it go ahead.
They'll all be equally impacted by this. Emily, do you know?
Absolutely. I don't think we know exactly where the other companies sit right now. And to your points earlier, this doesn't just impact car ride sharing drivers. It's also truckers, therapists, entertainers, writers. So there's so many different industries and companies attached to it. Right now, we know that Uber has been the most vocal. Its CEO on a recent analyst call was talking about how California accounts for, what percentage of its business. We haven't heard quite as much from Lyft, so it should be interesting. Tomorrow is January 1. That's when this is about to go into effect, to see whether or not these other companies and others impacted speak up.
To me, it seems like it would be fairly easy to measure how many hours you're working, particularly if you're a tech platform, to just say, okay, if you work 20 hours or less, you're a freelancer. If you work 30 hours or more, you're not. You're full-time if you get to 35, 36, 40 hours or higher. I could see one of the unintended consequences of that being Uber saying, forget it, we're not letting anybody work over 35 hours, though, too.
Or, the part of the issue, too, is the wait time. Do you count that as time that they're actually working when they're waiting to pick up passengers? And so the companies say that they can't operate as they are right now. One of the main things, too, that I don't think helps, and you alluded to this, Sarah, was Uber always says it's a platform. It's not really a good look when you're saying that drivers aren't a part of your core business, and I think that just gives more ammo to lawmakers.
All valid points. We'll see how this starts to play out. Deirdre, thank you. Great to see you. Sarah, thank you. And Emily, thank you, too.
All right, coming up with a recent strength in the energy market carry over into the new year.